Okay, I'm gonna make a quick video because why not? I had a longer version of this video. We're just gonna go through it. So LTT made a new video, and this video is about RAM usage in Windows and Linux. And I'm just gonna go and they added sections to it, so here we can see browsing and such. But anyway, so the main problem I have with this video is that it's kind of misleading, right? What do I mean misleading? Well, you see the RAM in use section. Yeah. What Windows does is it does something, I think the terminology is backstacking. I might be wrong in the terminology, but anyway, basically it will preload some of the things you have in RAM onto your disk in your swap. Well, on Windows it's called page files. It's a bit different, but you know, it can be used in the same way. And what you will see throughout this video is that the amount of committed will actually rise quite a bit, and you get to 33 gigabytes or something, and it will actually use 33 gigabytes of your disk space. Now, the reason why this is very important is because Windows sometimes will retain some of this, even when you close applications, stuff like that, in case you want to reopen them or other things. It depends. This is not entirely accurate, but Windows has something called prefetching and superfetching, and has a main management service. I'll call it that. You can rage in the comments. Called sysmain. And if you disable this, then disable superfetch and prefetch, you will have less committed RAM. And this is very important because caching is fine. Caching on Linux and on Windows, it will rise, and you can see it here in the end. I think it's around here to do Baldur's Gate. I think there we go. Here's an example. We can see that Windows is actually committing 33.1 gigabytes and have even had the page file as big as 36.2 gigabytes, right? On Linux, it's using 11.9. It barely touched swap at some point and have 8.2 kilobytes in swap. So the thing is that Windows has some questionable memory management. I'm going to be real here. And so the amount of RAM that it actually wants to use is a lot closer to this number than to this number, because Windows will sometimes discard some of the things. Just be like, well, it's going to be in RAM, and then we're going to keep it nice looking. And this bar is not accurate when it comes to how much RAM your PC actually uses, because it will use some for swap. You can see here that 11.7 gigabyte is cached, and on Linux here 22.1 gigabytes is in cache or buffer cache. And the magic about this is that, well, Linux can reclaim this. This is just nice to have. This is not need to have. And the page file here on Windows, well, the amount of committed memory is, well, it's necessary for Windows unless you disable those things. And if you disable swapping or page files entirely, or just disable superfetch, prefetch, and the sysmain thing, which is like 2 registry keys and a service that you disable and then you reboot, you will notice that it uses way less memory in general, and that's very important. That's a very, very, very important distinction. Okay? So because the memory is being used differently, you cannot do an apples to apples comparison. And that's one of the things that rubs me the wrong way with this video, is that, hey, I didn't see, when I skimmed it the first time, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't hear any single mention of like, hey, like this is how caching works. This is how Windows does it. And I'm gonna come to a point, and I'm gonna simplify it. So when you're committing this amount of data, right, you are writing, in this case, 33 gigabytes to the disk. Now, depending on how much you do on your system, you might write 50 gigabytes, 100 gigabytes. And although a lot of SSDs are gonna have the lifespan for it, you still gotta remember that, hey, your lifespan for your SSDs are finite. So when you're unnecessarily wearing it down, that's going to be an effect too. And that's one of the things I think is very important. So I think that if Linus Tech Tips, hey Linus, if you're going to remake this video, I would love for you to do a few things. First of all, go through the different types of caching, memory, page files / swap, and give some quick explanations for it. I know this video is probably not for the more technical at heart, but I would like the distinction to be a bit more known. Then disable prefetch, superfetch, and disable sysmain and see how that affects RAM usage, which will show you a more accurate variant of how much RAM that Windows actually uses, because now it's just going to use what it has and it's not going to unnecessarily cache on your drive, which is some of it. Which on slow SSDs, it can actually speed up your system to disable superfetch and prefetch because you're not putting a load of crap on your drive. And this might just have been an earlier Windows bug, but it used to be like that. So I just want to say this is some of the main things that like kind of bothers me about this video, is that it is not a apples to apples comparison. And I did not hear anything about swap or page cache or anything. And so I would like for you, if you're not going to disable superfetch and prefetch and you're like, well, that's a part of Windows, that's fine, but you should set the page file to be 2 gigabytes. You can change the swappiness on Linux and how much it's going to put, how much memory you got to have filled before it puts it into swap, but there's no need to change those settings. They're fairly optimized, but the amount of extra writes that you can get on a Windows system just for it from it existing is insane, and might even be 5 or 10 times the amount of writes that you're going to do on Linux doing the exact same tasks. And I think that's pretty scary, and quite frankly, I think it's a huge mistake on Windows' part, using memory like this. I get the idea, right? It's like, well, we're gonna put some things on the disk, so when you need to clear the RAM, you can just do it right away, and we will still have a copy of the data. I mean, kind of cool in concept, but again, write cycles are finite on your SSD. When you've done all your cycles, it's done. Now, most SSDs are rated to be used between 3 to 15 to 20 years in terms of the write cycles. It varies a lot, but you got to remember, the more you wear on your stuff, well, the more you wear on it. So nothing is entirely free. And so I think that's a little caveat, a little extra thing that could be done to make this video just a bit more scientific. Because that's very important too. If you don't have 33 gigabytes of space, which both drives were, what was it, Saber and 4 terabytes? Saber and Rocket, wasn't it? Yeah. They made a few different variations of this one, if I recall. So we're going to go here, and this one has 2,800 TBW. There's the Non Plus here. There we go. It's an older one, PCIe Gen 3. And we do have DRAM cache, which is also important. Because host memory caching and such is also a thing where your system will use your system's RAM for caching, moving files and such. You can limit how much it does on Linux, but on Windows it's kind of meh. I don't know a setting for it anyway for Windows, but yeah, you can see that we have a DRAM cache, which is TDR3L, running at 1866 at 0.13. It's not slow RAM per se. It has 1 gigabyte of cache in total. Okay. So if you move a gigabyte, it can cache a gigabyte and then write it to the actual flash. In this scenario, there's multiple hardware versions, so it might differ depending on the amount of layers that are on the actual NAND flash, and so on and so forth. So speed may vary, and as you can see, the die write speed is only 57 megabytes. The read speed is quite a bit higher, and you have a set amount of dies. So we have, this is the worst case scenario, planes per die, 2 decks per die, 8 chips. So we multiply this by 8 and we get a good case scenario. We of course have these speeds, sequential read and sequential write, and some of it is assisted by the caching. You can also see the Endurance series is way different from the other one that we saw. It uses SLC caching, so it will actually have cells that's being used for caching. Now it varies in size from manufacturer to manufacturer and different variations, so that may vary, but yeah, it's when you put the data down, it will be fast, and then it will slowly, at this rate, span it out a bit between the different chips. But the main idea is that your cache is going to be faster. Your SSD cache is going to be faster, and your DRAM cache is going to be way faster than your actual dies here, and that's why, like, for heavy writes per second and such, this is not great. Like, this is not enterprise grade, but like for most users, you won't see it, right? But having a bad drive without DRAM cache, without SLC cache, maybe even with the SLC cache, you might start to notice some stutters, or some slowdowns when you're using something like 16 gigs of RAM. Now, of course, I love videos that advocate for Linux, absolutely, but I also like to put in the extra context where it kind of makes sense. Because there's nothing worse than having a video that's like, yeah, that's the right result, but the formula is questionable. Doesn't matter if it's right. The logic also has to be there, right? And the logic of we're gonna read this one tab that says in use and that's gonna be it is quite frankly not it. Now I might have to watch the conclusion, which I think I saw before. Oh, there's some editing here. They might have changed their mind. This might be a re-upload, because they can do that because it's such a big channel. Let's see. So close. Okay, yeah, that's the conclusion. I might not have heard, but I did not hear him mention. He mentioned swap for macOS. Okay, this is the only mention of swap. Okay, but yeah, Windows, let's keep a backup of it in on disk is again horrible when we come to something like a RAM crisis or an NAND flash SSD crisis. It's really just bad. I would look at the so I'm gonna write this little comment. I would look at the page file, try to disable superfetch and prefetching, maybe even sysmain, or limit the page file on Windows. So it probably shows how much RAM it wants to use, because 33 gigabytes of committed is quite a bit. Remember, caching and buffer caching is not the same as swap or page file. So it's fine. When it caches things, Linux will discard the cache when needed. I suppose Windows will as well. But it's still, again, unnecessary disk writes, and it doesn't actually tell you if Windows wants to use this amount of memory, because I have tried to disable swap and then see the general RAM usage rise to crazy amounts, and usually you require a full Windows reinstall if your shit's corrupt, and it's just gonna run like shit if it just fills up swap with slop, micro slop. Hey, gotta call them out, right? But so this is my video. I'm gonna probably re-record this for the third time. I think it's the 7th. We'll see.